Alright guys, I'm here back with a new video, and in this video, I'm back with another video game video, but one that is a bit unique in the fact that this is a game that has a correlation to the main topic of this channel, that being reality TV. So here, I'll be talking about the recently released Survivor video game, Survivor Castaway Island. A game that I had recently just played, playing the Season 1 campaign 3 times, to which here I'll be talking about my experience with it. But first I do want to run through my more general thoughts on the game first. First, in the fact that obviously this is a Survivor video game, something that is obviously not very common. I mean, while there have been Survivor video games in the past, very few of them actually truly focused on the more social strategy aspects of the show. But this is a Survivor video game that actually attempts to replicate the experience of Survivor. Now, how successful is it? We'll talk about that. But I do think that's something that's at least cool about this. Again, despite all the flaws we're going to be talking about with this game, it is still probably the best Survivor video game made that was released by an official outlet. But with that comes a major talking point with this game, in the fact that it's not really a Survivor video game. It actually is a Koh-Lanta game, which, even though Koh-Lanta is the French version of Survivor, to where they obviously just ended up localizing it for the Western audience, to where that is how we got Survivor Castaway Island here. And even beyond that, the production company that was involved in making this game is Banijay, who is the company that has made Survivor UK, Survivor South Africa. So through that, I mean, this game doesn't really have that much real connection to Survivor US. But again, it is still a Survivor video game, which is, again, cool, even though we'll talk about how low budget it overall is. But despite that, I will say, like, straight up, I did have fun playing this. Now, is this actually a good game? No. Is this even as good of a Survivor video game as I would have wanted it to be? No. But I still had fun with the experience of playing a game that at least tries to mirror the overall Survivor experience, even though obviously it could have been a lot better. But with that, again, let's just talk about my experience, and then through that, we'll talk about all the other aspects of the game alongside that. So obviously, when you start off a new season, you are able to pick the player you want to play, where, again, a strange aspect of this game is the fact that, first up, the seasons are only starting with 12 people, 6 people on 2 tribes, and you get to pick which player you play as on both tribes. But something that is funny is that the names for these players are randomly generated, very clearly based off of names of survivors from the past. Also, strangely, a lot of them seem to be from very similar seasons, where I did notice a lot of Survivor 43 people. You got Jesse, Mariah, Justine, a lot of Survivor 28 people, Tony, Garrett, Spencer, Jatia, a lot of Philippines people. You got Malcolm, Abby Maria, Angie, Roxy. It definitely feels like they just copied the names of the cast of a few specific seasons and then randomly chose what names to pick for these players. Again, the character models for these players stay the same throughout all the playthroughs. It's simply what name is attached to them, which is funny. And all of that, again, you can't customize your character. It's a preset character that are just the same people every time, which again can be a bit underwhelming. I mean, again, it could have been cool if you could have at least like tried to put yourself in there, at least put your own name onto the character, but obviously that's not how it works. But on my first playthrough here, I did end up picking Tony, because obviously, and immediately when you jump into the game, you're instantly thrown into a reward challenge, to which straight up the challenges in this game are terrible. I really think they're like definitely the worst aspect of this game. And the fact that the challenges are, one, obviously extremely rudimentary, and the fact that they're obviously extremely low budget games that were made with very little effort to them. But even beyond that, they just suck to play. Where again, a decent chunk of them are simply just doing quick time events. You do have like a target based one where you have to stop the cursor in the right spot. You have more obstacle course based ones that get really monotonous, from the likes of rolling a ball through a course that I could never get through in time, or a challenge that feels reminiscent of Quest for Fire, but it's really largely based around just maneuvering yourself through these really tight corridors, through turning your character at the right time. And again, all these challenges are just kind of boring and do seem highly variant, to where I guess some of them were brutally difficult, some of them were extremely easy. Where obviously you do pick up on techniques for them the more you play the game, but still, at the end of the day, again, these were not extremely well made challenges. But the reward challenges themselves also don't really serve that much purpose in the grand scheme of things, where again, winning them can give you extra boons back at camp, from either having like the fire started already, or giving you extra materials, or giving you a massage, because that's a thing that's very common, where doing so will increase your stamina meter. Where again, let's talk about the stamina meter, which sucks. I hate it. it. It's probably another one of my least favorite aspects of this game, in the fact that it feels like so much of this game is based around maintaining your stamina meter, because coming into the game, you essentially have your stamina at 100. However, if your stamina reaches 0, you are medevaced from the game, to which most things you do end up taking up stamina. Doing challenges takes away 7 stamina from you. A major aspect back at camp is collecting resources, doing which costs 2 stamina every single time you do an activity to get you that material. Also, if your camp doesn't have enough materials at the end of each day, you then lose 7 stamina for not having those materials. And again, straight up, like, one of my biggest issues in my first few playthroughs was just management of my stamina, to where I just very much struggled with finding the right balance in not getting medevaced from the game, but also not pissing off the other players. As something that's also kind of dumb about this game is that your relationship with other players can be largely based around how many materials you collect, which again costs stamina. So if you don't get those things, people are upset at you, to where again it obviously lessens your chances in the game. And I should mention the fact that each day is structured similarly, to where you do have a challenge, either a reward or immunity challenge, followed by a camp portion of the day, where first up you do get a long conversation within the tribe, to where first we get like introductions to the cast, where a lot of these people have like really ridiculous introductions, to where literally one of the funniest moments I think I've had in playing a game recently is the reveal that Morgan is a flat earther who also thinks that they're on a production set while filming the show, which is all really funny. And what's funny is that this is literally a line that is repeated in every subsequent playthrough, where at least one character on each season is a flat earther, so that's something. But through this, we are also given choices that can affect your overall relationship with these players, which I will say straight up, I hate this. While I think it's great on paper, obviously, I do like this aspect of being able to talk to people and have your choices on what you say matter. The issue I personally have with it is the fact that it's never clear how those things will affect other things. It seems like these choices are very arbitrary, where a lot of these choices are not that dissimilar from each other, yet for some reason, some of them seem to make people like you, while other ones don't. And again, it's not super clear why that's the case or how these things are happening. They just do. And again, I think that's a major criticism of the game for me as well. Following this, we then get to the true gameplay back at camp, where you are given 15 minutes to explore the camp, during which you can do a number of things, and you can collect resources, which again, doing so is very important to maintaining your relationships with others, while also keeping your stamina up in the long term, even though it reduces your stamina short-term wise. But also you can go in searching for an idol, which straight up, I never found one in the 3 playthroughs I did. I should mention the fact that the island itself ends up being relatively larger than you would kind of expect it to be, where it does end up being kind of difficult to find the other players, though obviously they do give you a map to use, which you can use that to find people. The really annoying aspect of all this is the fact that throughout this entire game, even through challenges as well, there's no ability to control the camera, which can be very frustrating, and not really being able to see exactly where you want to go, though again, that's kind of what you expect from a game as low budget as this. But you can also end up talking to the other players, which is cool on paper, though again, it's another one of these situations where the overall conversations here are pretty rudimentary here. Now, some of these do have special conversations that you can have with them, though those again just end up being like the questions during the group meetings of, again, just these arbitrary answers that end up affecting your relationship. Like one that comes up a lot in particular is someone saying that, oh, I have something to show you, and you can respond by saying, is that an idol, a fake idol, or a rock? And for some reason, one of those things is different than the other and makes the person upset at you, which is really stupid. Which I guess in general, I should talk about the writing in this game, which is really funny. Obviously, again, it was a localized version of a French game, and through that, there's a lot of typos, there's a lot of bizarrely structured sentences that end up just being kind of funny. But you can also end up do general chit chat, which will pretty much guarantee that you increase your relationship with this person, though again, it's not to a significant degree, and also it does obviously take time away from your overall timer. Well, again, you can also talk strategy with the player. However, from what I've noticed, it seems like no one is really receptive to you unless you're in the positive in your relationship with them. So you can offer to make an alliance with them, you can ask them where they're going to vote, you can ask them for information about others, or you can tell them where you want them to vote. All of these things, again, won't matter unless you have a good relationship with them. Which with that, I guess I should talk about the overall relationship system, where again, there is an entire alliance chart in the game, which is a really cool aspect of this game that I do like. Again, the fact that you can see everyone's relationships with each other, including your relationship, and see how certain things impact that relationship. And again, that's cool. Though again, obviously something I noticed eventually is the fact that, again, yeah, if you're not in the green, you're essentially not going to be able to get much done. Though again, you can chit chat with each player up to 3 times, seemingly per session, that again, doing it enough times does eventually build your relationship enough to where you can start an actual strategic relationship with them. But I will say, again, during my first playthrough here, I did very much struggle with getting to terms with how this game actually operates, where, again, another thing that I should talk about here is the fact that obviously this game is nothing like actual Survivor, where the real game of Survivor is obviously a game where everyone is playing the game. Everyone is doing things actively that can change things on a dime. However, everyone is, again, doing things. Everyone's building relationships. Everyone is helping around a camp. Everyone is doing these things that can shift the dynamics of the tribe, while in Survivor Castaway Island, it's solely reliant on you. You are the only person that has any real agency in the game. You're the only person that has the ability to go to every single person, build the relationship with them. You're the only person that has the ability to collect a decent amount of resources. So essentially, a lot of this game's focus is obviously on you. Again, the only things that happen outside of your control are these things that happen during the tribe events, where, again, you can have people arguing or people bonding, but it usually happens over the course of just 2 or 3 events, so where not much really changes outside of, again, the things that you are actively doing yourself, which is something that can make the game a lot easier, as I'll later talk about, but it also makes the game a lot more difficult if you don't know what you're doing. Where straight up, again, like in my original playthrough, I did not spend as much time collecting resources, or at least not enough to where it would make my tribe like me, to the point where even though I would start to build these relationships socially, they would then proceed to be knocked away because I was not getting enough resources for the camp. And through that, again, my camp had no resources, to where I would also lose all my stamina. To where my first playthrough, I was very much harmed by the negative aspects of that style of game here, to where straight up I only went to tribal twice on my first season. Coming into the first one, I was actually in a somewhat decent spot. I had a good relationship with 3 of the other players. While 2 of them were on the outs, I was targeting Garrett and got everyone on board to vote for Garrett. Something this game does in its tribe events is kind of allude to the fact of who might have the idol. So again, it did very much allude that Garrett had one, to where, again, I think I actually make one of my more impressive plays coming into the first tribe I'll even go to where, again, I had gotten all the votes on Garrett. However, I knew there was a decent chance of Garrett voting for me, to where I end up throwing my vote onto Mariah instead. So when Garrett eventually does play his idol, I actually get saved by the fact that there is a tie due to my split vote, to where I end up getting saved on the revote. Again, essentially, I Devin Pinto'd myself, where Devin obviously made a similar move in HHH and Final 5 round, to where, again, I was pretty happy of how that overall turned out. But this is where, again, at this point in the game, I did get ruined by my lack of understanding of how the stamina system worked, to where, again, I was super low on stamina, and due to my lack of getting the right amount of supplies, I then proceed to have to rest at the very beginning of the day, where that's also a thing, where you can rest at the very beginning of the day to restore some stamina, though obviously you don't get time to talk to the other players, to which, if you don't talk to the other players, they end up being upset at you anyway, along with the fact that they're upset at you for not getting any supplies, making it so that it's a very detrimental move to your relationships in the game. Something that, again, I figure out how to manage that later on, but again, in this first playthrough, it really did doom me, to where I essentially had to sleep for 2 days in a row to get my stamina up to a decent level, only then to see that all of my relationships are completely crumbled, to where I then proceed to lose another immunity challenge and proceed to get voted out 1 vote right before the merge, which, again, was kind of annoying. Again, it definitely made me realize just how important the overall stamina system is, and getting to terms with that, as really this vote off here was pretty much solely because of how I mismanaged the stamina system, as without that, again, I was in a pretty decent spot coming out of that first tribal, only for that to completely crumble immediately after that. But that takes us to the second playthrough I did, where this time I played as Brandon. And this playthrough ended up being kind of unnotable to me. I do feel like my first and my third playthroughs are 2 that I remember the most. The second one is kind of like an in-between of the 2. Again, I started to realize, okay, I definitely need to manage the stamina system a bit more, but I still didn't fully recognize how. And while I did end up doing a lot more collecting of resources, I feel like I did it too much, to where I still end up struggling with my stamina to a degree. Though, again, I still was able to pretty much take control of my original tribe tribe, as again, like any competent player would in a game like Castaway Island, where again, you're the only one actually playing. But here again, in the pre-merge, I pretty much take control of my tribe. I built a final 2 with Roxy and with Keith. I led the charge against voting out Corinne, and then later against Shamar right before the merge, where by this point in the game, I had good relationships with pretty much everyone there. But then I got to the merge, where in this game, the merge has a purge challenge, meaning that if you lose the challenge at the merge, you are eliminated, which is stupid. Which I know Koh-Lanta and like other international versions of the show do this, of have a challenge solely determine an elimination at a specific point in the game. Like obviously Survivor SA did that back in the final 4 of its initial season. And again, I know this is a thing that happens in other versions of the show, but it's still really stupid for it to be happening here. And it's also really dumb because obviously it's based around these really broken challenges that really screwed me over in this instance, where my merge challenge was this archery challenge where you had to score 16 points in a minute, while you also only had 16 arrows. Now, straight up, I misunderstood the rules at the point where I didn't realize the fact that if you hit a target that's further away from you, you can get more points. So through that, I just continuously shot the one closest to me, but missed a few shots to where I lost anyway, which is dumb. And again, because that, despite me having played well up to that point, I ended up getting eliminated at the merge, which was really frustrating. But then we then get to my final playthrough of the game, where here I did end up playing as Malcolm, which is where I feel like I started to finally piece together how to play this game. Where, straight up, I don't want to brag, but I do feel like I played a pretty much near perfect game of Survivor Castaway Island on my 3rd attempt. But again, it was by this point that I realized the balance that you need to really just get through this game without much difficulty. Again, the things I learned about how to approach this game are, first up, you need to, again, get supplies. However, again, before this, I was a bit unsure on how many supplies I actually needed. However, I realized at this point that if you get 8 resources per day, you can get out of the day, again, still not having wasted that much of your stamina, but also getting to the point where people aren't upset at you, where it is this happy medium of you getting enough resources to survive, you also not burning any of your relationships, while still being not in danger to be medevaced. To where, again, I figured out that that was kind of the perfect amount to obtain, to where, again, that's pretty much what I did every day from this point forward, is just getting 8 supplies, no matter what they are, and being content beyond that. Though I will say also the fact that there are multiple ways to get supplies. Obviously, there's getting wood, you can get water, you can get coconuts, or you can fish. Getting coconuts was just terrible, really annoying to do, as sometimes coconuts simply just wouldn't drop, which would waste your stamina there. Same thing with fishing. I just continuously failed at catching fish, despite the fact that I was walking up to them slowly. So again, I really just focused on getting water and firewood, which again ended up being enough to get through the game. So again, at that point, I had the resource aspect of the game sorted. I also pretty much realized how to game the relationship aspects as well, to where something else that I noticed is that the fact that if you don't talk to players over the course of a single camp section, that would lead to that person lowering their relationship with you at the end of it, meaning that you at least need to check in with every single player to maintain good relationships with every single player. So through that, essentially what I would do is go to each player once throughout the entire 15-minute period and chit chat with them at least once. Usually only once with the players that I already had good relationships with, but talking up to 3 times with the players that I didn't have as good relationships with, which made it very easy to just get on everyone's good side. Also, another thing I noticed is the fact that it's very beneficial if you just straight up avoid the tribe events. As I mentioned, the tribe events usually have a lot of variance to them and how you answer the questions and how that can affect your relationships, to where, again, straight up, I just went around them and didn't interact with them actively to have more control over how my relationships were building with each player. Also, I noticed that a lot of the time there wasn't really that much purpose in using the more strategic aspects of your conversations with people, to where, again, as I mentioned, there are these more strategic ways of talking to the other players and trying to ask them for an alliance or tell them who to target. However, straight up, I just found the targeting system in this game to be kind of pointless for the majority of it, where it just kind of wastes time when you should be better off just doing general chit chats with people, especially considering right before you go to tribal, the game gives you the option to have conversations with 2 players before you go, to which I always felt like that was the perfect time to set up who you want to target instead. So again, I feel like all those kind of hacks just kind of combined together to where it really just let me kind of just steamroll this season. Again, I only went to tribal once in the pre-merge, to where I had a pretty easy time. So again, I pretty much ran the early portions of the game game, building good relationships with Rick and Sierra, also voting out Michael, also having a good relationship with Jatia initially, though that kind of disintegrated through some dumb questions eventually, and also having started off on a rocky foot with Allie, though continuously tried to build that relationship. By the way, was never really in danger coming into the merge, to where the merge was, again, the danger point for me, where, again, this is where essentially a challenge determines everything, and considering the challenge seems to be just random on which one you get, I was really worried I was going to get a really dumb challenge here, though I did get a more interesting challenge, in it being the sandbag race, essentially a challenge of you doing quick time events as you navigate through an obstacle course, to which I ended up completing it pretty easily, though there was definitely a worry part in the balance beam, which overall the balancing system in this game ends up being kind of annoying, to where it did cause me to lose certain challenges, though again, I barely got through it here. But through that, I ended up losing Rick at the merge, who again was one of my closest allies, meaning I actually come into the merge not in a particularly great spot. Again, I have the alliance with Sierra, though my relationship with Jatia and Allie were ones I was still trying to repair. Well, obviously there are now 3 other players from the opposing tribe to deal with as well, who all are neutral to each other at this point, which I will say that did seem to be a bit of a strange aspect of this, to where coming into the merge, there didn't really seem to be any solid tribal lines like you think that they would be at this point, where it just feels like relationships just reset instead of having a stronger bond amongst the people from the other tribe, or even having more of a bond with the people from my original tribe. So that did feel a bit strange to me. Though really this merge vote was probably the only point in the entire game where I felt somewhat in danger, particularly due to the fact that, again, I wasn't able to fully utilize my strat of just chit-chatting with everyone just yet. So again, I came into the merge with my relationship with Jatia being kind of fractured, to where, along with the likes of Mike and Tina from the new tribe not being super high on me yet either, it did lead to me being in a precarious spot. Though a massive aspect of my game at this point was picking up Angie, one of the people that, again, came from the other tribe, though instantly ended up having a good relationship with, to where I really secured that relationship. So here I decided to make a bit of a ballsy move, to where I decided to essentially target one of my old tribe mates in Jatia, where, again, considering my fractured relationship with Jatia coming into the merge, and also the fact that Jatia was not particularly well liked by the opposing tribe either, I decided to get both Sierra and Angie on board with voting Jatia, while also I would obviously vote Jatia, while also banking on the fact that at least someone else would vote Jatia to hopefully get Jatia out in this round. So at that point, I felt pretty confident in the fact that I would be able to run the game through, again, my relationship with Sierra and Angie, along with my relationship with Allie, which was about to turn positive. So really, to me, it's I decided to just cut Jatia at this point, largely as a self-preservation move, but also someone that, again, at this point, was probably not working with me either, and also was probably easier to convince Angie to vote for as well, with that being the person she has the most hostile relationship. So again, I felt like overall that was the move I had to make here. But again, from this point on, I really end up pretty much controlling the game, where I'm essentially able to utilize that strategy of having all these one-on-ones with everyone to get to the point where by the time of the following tribal, I'm at the point where I have a good relationship with pretty much everybody. Even being able to get to the point where I have a good relationship with even the 2 newbies in Tina and Mike. Though I still decide to lead the charge against Mike, considering he's still the person I have the least amount of a relationship with. So again, Mike just easily goes there. But then we get to the final 5, where I think from this point on, I think I actually play this pretty optimally. Where, I mean, straight up, to be fair, a lot of that is due to the fact that in Survivor Castaway Island, there obviously isn't any blowback for any of the moves you make. Where again, no matter how big of a betrayal you make, and considering the fact that you left some people out of the vote, it doesn't seem to have any effect on your jury prospects or even your relationships with the people that you blindsided that are still in the game. And again, I took advantage of that to the point where coming into the final 5 round, while the initial target you would assume would be Tina, considering the fact that Tina was the last kind of outsider in the game, I decided to keep Tina around, particularly due to the fact that I had a closer relationship with Tina than anyone remaining in the game, while Allie was another one of the people that I had less of a relationship with, while also being someone that had a much closer relationship to Sierra. So we're considering that worry that Allie would side with Sierra over me down the road, I end up flipping the vote here on Allie by getting both Angie and Tina on board, leaving Sierra out of the vote, especially considering the fact that she just straight up refused to vote Allie when I asked her, to where I end up taking her out there. So really from this point on, I'm pretty much guaranteed to win. Or my only worry was another purge challenge, which again didn't happen, to where again I pretty much knew I was going to win at this point. I had the closest relationships with all 4 of the people left, to where none of them had as good competitive relationships with each other. Though I did think about jury prospects. Now, again, straight up the jury seems to just vote on who has the closest relationship at the time they're voted out. So at this point, I kind of realized that I think I actually need to take out Sierra at this point, really due to the fact that Tina and Angie have a more hostile relationship towards each other, while Sierra has a neutral relationship with both Tina and Angie, meaning that there's at least more of a chance that I would be cut over Sierra than any of the others. Well, again, being in the final three of both Tina and Angie would pretty much guarantee that I'd be taking the two. So I need to get Sierra out of the game. However, an issue here came from the fact that I needed to find a way to get Sierra out, where again, due to the fact that Tina and Angie had a more hostile relationship towards each other, getting them to agree to not go after each other was the thing I couldn't necessarily do, to which I actually decided to go through with a 2-1-1 plan. I think this is probably the most fun I had in this game, being able to actually execute a 2-1-1, where I end up winning immunity here, the only immunity challenge I won the entire season, to which when doing so, it allowed me to obviously execute this 2-1-1 unfettered, to where I end up going to Tina, who again was refusing to vote for Sierra and made sure that she voted for Angie, while then going to Sierra and made sure that she voted for Tina to avoid the tie with Angie, while I went to Angie, who again I had the closest relationship at this point in the game, and told Angie to go for Sierra, to which again she was more willing to do so than Tina was, due to the much better relationship I have with Angie than with Tina, which allowed for me to also put my vote in Sierra, again allowing me to take out Sierra in a 2-1-1 vote, which again was a really fun moment there. And that all took me to the final three, where at this point again both people were probably going to take me to the end. Angie wins final immunity, to which she takes me to final two, to which again I pretty much had the game won at this point. I will say Final Tribal was very strange in this game, to where for some reason they have a 6-person jury with a final two, which makes no sense. And why'd they bring back Rick from the jury despite him being purged at the merge? Like, you would think that it would have been a 5-person jury, but either way. Also, funny thing is the fact that we do get the vote reveal at a reunion show, to which at the reunion show everyone's just wearing the same clothes as they were wearing on the island, which is stupid. But again, I do end up winning here. But I will say, a little bit surprised I didn't win more unanimously. I did only win in a 4-2 vote, which, like, I can see how I probably didn't get the vote of Jatia, but really outside that, I don't even know who the other person I didn't get the vote of, but whatever. And I won Survivor Castaway Island. I am a Survivor winner, so that's something. And again, just overall, I had fun playing Survivor Castaway Island. Is this actually like a great game in the grand scheme of things? No. Is it even a good enough Survivor game? Not really, but I kind of enjoyed it just due to how simple it was. The fact that it is this very basic version of Survivor, and obviously a game of Survivor that is solely reliant on your own point of view, to where it did make it pretty fun to just kind of allow it to be this playground of you being able to make these like pretty insane moves that would be very difficult to execute in real life. Though also obviously it is a very dumbed down version of Survivor, to where again there isn't much variety outside of that, outside pulling off these like really fun plurality votes. There's not really many other things you can really do here. But again, I found the overall experience of playing this game pretty fun, despite how low budget and how rudimentary a lot of the gameplay was here, to where there is also a season 2, which from what I understand is essentially just a harder difficulty of you starting with less stamina. So I haven't gotten around to playing it yet, though I do want to play it at some point down the road, and I'll probably play it on Twitch at twitch.tv/TheMarine at some point. Or you can check my VOD channel, The Marine Review, live eventually when I play it, to where again it'll probably be posted there as well. Along with the fact that if you want to watch the raw footage of me having played what I've played of Castaway Island so far, you can also find that on my VOD channel, which I'll post those links in the description, which that's about 6 hours of gameplay there. But again, that's pretty much all I gotta say about Survivor Castaway Island. Now moving forward, obviously just expect more of the typical type of content you expect from this channel. Some video game videos here and there, mostly reality TV content, obviously a lot more Survivor content, which obviously we got the ending of Survivor 45 coming up, which I'll have a really long review for that, so stay tuned for that. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.